So now, let me just pull up my introductory sheet. So again, for those of you who are recorded and anybody who arrived late, please welcome to the Friday edition of Richardson Plano Networkers. And today our guest speaker is Lori. Is it Vann or Vaughn?
It's Vann.
Vann. Okay, great. And she's going to talk today from lessons from the couch to the boardroom. Should be an interesting conversation. So, as business leaders, what your staff, partners, and clients aren't telling you is hurting your business. There are many reasons why businesses lose customers, but unless there's a negative review on Yelp, Google, or social media, you may never know the true reason. During this insightful event, participants will discover certain things that clients and employees look for in a business, which if you lack them, they may walk. Find out what your staff and customers are really saying. Lori Vann is a coach, counselor, consultant, media commentator, and speaker, serving the DFW community for over 20 years. Lori is the author of 5 books, with several more in the works. As a licensed professional counselor supervisor, Lori has practiced in a variety of settings, from inpatient psychiatric hospitals to her own private practice. She has also been a professor of psychology for 2 colleges, enabling her to provide unique insights. With over 285 international and national media interviews, she is considered a go-to mental health expert. Lori is a graduate of Pepperdine University, where she received with honors her Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology, and is a graduate of Chapman University, where she graduated Summa Cum Laude with a Master of Arts degree in psychology. Please join me in welcoming Lori Vann.
Thank you. If you could find out how to save thousands of dollars in lost revenue, bad PR, and time, would you be interested? What if the solutions were actually easily implementable? Are your ears perking up a little bit? The reality is that we often make things much more difficult than what they actually have to be. We question things when they seem too easy, too basic. For whatever reason, that's just human nature. And the reality is that things can actually be quite simplistic. So one realization that I have had with being a counselor for over 20 years and having all of that clinical experience is that sometimes the recommendations are really that simple and basic and uncomplicated and easily implementable. For example, when you feel stressed, overwhelmed, and nervous, and you can't really think clearly, and maybe even on the verge of a panic attack, one of the things everyone says is just breathe. And you go, oh, well, how does that really help? But the reality is breathing actually really is that simplistic, and that it has been shown to help physiologically and psychologically. Now, I'm not going to go into all the physiological reasons why breathing works and how we activate our parasympathetic nervous system, and getting more specific into the vagal nerve and how that connects from our brain down to all of our major organs, and how grounding works. But on the surface, when someone says breathe, there actually now is the scientific research that explains the why behind why it works. And as just a quick hit note, if you do start to feel overwhelmed, maybe on the verge of that panic, breathing really does help. And it's breathing from your diaphragm, because one of the very first things that will take place when you move from your logical brain into your emotional brain is you change your breathing patterns. And as soon as you start to change your breathing patterns and you go from abdominal or diaphragmic breathing up into your chest, you're starting to deplete some of that oxygen to your brain. So you're not going to think as clearly. And it sets off a whole, it triggers a whole series of events. And that's where breathing gets your body back into that rhythm and helps you start to get back into that logical thinking again. But anyway, I digress. A lot of times, and I see this in my own field, it actually annoys me a little bit, to be honest, is that we cloak these very simple concepts into fancy words and phrases and terminology. And I think it's to help us look more sophisticated and more educated and wiser. For example, a lot of times, whether I'm doing counseling or coaching, I talk about your emotional brain versus your logical brain. Well, now they're calling it your wise brain. And I'm like, okay, whatever, use your own term, but that's what we're talking about is emotions versus logic. Well, the thing is in our business practices, we have the tendency to maybe do the same thing. And we have to be very mindful. We have to be watchful for that potential roadblock of trying to make things more complicated than what they actually have to be. And when we get stuck in a problem, sometimes we need to go back to the basics. And that even means just in the morning, when you're stuck on a business problem, are you allowing enough time to just sit and think about it, undistracted, turning the phone off, just you and a piece of paper and pen, and just sitting there and focusing only on that problem for 5 or 10 minutes? And the amazing thing is that often when you've blocked out all these distractions, you do start to actually generate some ideas. But the thing is we get sidetracked with these distractions and we're trying to come up with a solution to a problem, but we're doing that in the context of the phone's ringing and there's a message on the screen and there's this and there's that. And so we go, oh, I just can't think of a solution. It's like, well, because you're not actually really trying to think and focus on the solution. So that'd be one of those quick tips right there. But while there are several lessons that I could provide, that I could offer, such as boundaries in personal and professional life, identifying and training leaders, not dictators. Perfectionism is only the goal for surgeons and pilots, and maybe a couple other fields too. Those are going beyond what our talk is for today, and they're available, and I tailor them to your specific event or in a consulting session even. So getting into lesson 1, listen. Yes, I said something as simplistic as listening. And it does seem like one of those like duh kind of things, but I mean, truly, how many of you, by a show of hands or nods, have felt that you've expressed a concern about a business and you didn't feel listened to? I mean, I know that I can raise my hand and feel like I've conveyed concerns to businesses, and it's like, yeah, just give me your money. We don't care. We're a monopoly. We're just going to keep doing our same old kind of deal. And how many of you have maybe tried to express a concern to a manager or to your employer or even human relations and you felt dismissed? I mean, I'm sure a lot of you can raise your hand on that one. Maybe that was even the reason you became an entrepreneur, is because you got tired of being dismissed by the company or by your manager. And what did that do for you wanting to continue to do business with that store or that company? Yeah, I'm guessing yes. That really didn't motivate you that much, and you started to look for who's the competition. And at work, did that inspire you to work harder and to be more dedicated to that company? Probably not. Did it maybe increase some resentment instead? And if you have a resentful employee, do you think that's going to increase productivity or quality product? Probably not. So whether you are self-employed or you work for someone else, the principle of being a good listener is the same. And not truly listening and addressing the concern. And this is a major mistake that we see play out again and again. Not listening, not actively listening and taking into consideration and responding appropriately, that can kill your business. And it really can. A business that is not situationally aware of whether that's, socially speaking, of what's going on in the world and knowing how to read an audience, they're not aware of what's going on with their customer base, or they're not aware of what's going on with their employees, is one that will likely see these things that will cost your business thousands upon thousands of dollars, because it's going to cost you turnover. Employees don't want to stay at a company where they're not appreciated. They just don't. And they're going to find other jobs. You will see decreased productivity. You'll see lost revenue. And you are going to lose time trying to repair your reputation, whether that's online or with your direct customers. So again, those are things that affect whether you're a self-employed individual or you are if you're working in a company. So listening is not just sitting and nodding your head and an occasional, uh-huh. So let's role play a little bit. And imagine that all of you are in a counseling office and you have just told a deep, dark secret, or maybe something really traumatic. And your counselor's response was this: uh-huh, yeah, okay, yeah, keep going. And maybe they pull out their phone and they start to scroll. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's the point of your story? We're coming towards the end of the session. Can you like speed it up? Mm-hmm. Who in this group would feel heard? I mean, anyone? I mean, would you really feel heard by a counselor if they were responding to that as you're like pouring out your heart? Would you feel appreciated? Probably not. And would you be too motivated to return to that counselor? Guessing no. And one of the things when I teach ethics classes to counselors, which I've been doing for years, I emphasize customer service is your best defense, your best prevention method to a lawsuit or a complaint, because it's disgruntled clients are the ones that are going to be filing the board complaints or become litigious in some manner. So listening is active. It is engaging. And it doesn't mean to be a good listener. It doesn't mean that you're sitting and you're like with bated breath anticipating what you're about to say in response to them, because people sense that. And oftentimes in business, we might have a tendency to do that with our customers. That the customer is trying to explain something and maybe they're struggling to articulate their problem, and we get a little impatient. Or we go, okay, I know the solution, like this is so obvious. If they would just turn the on button, or if they would just plug it in, or if they would just whatever, and we just like, come on, you're wasting my time. I just want to give you the answer. We have to be aware of how that comes across, because you actually do put across a vibe. People pick up on that impatience. And again, that ruins the customer relationship. So again, it's about that listening. And to be clear, listening doesn't mean you're agreeing with them. It doesn't mean that you're like, customers are always right. It means that the customer always gets listened to, but it doesn't mean you have to always do what they're asking. So there's a difference there. And it doesn't mean that you have to compromise your ethics either in order to make a client happy, because sometimes clients aren't the right fit for your business. And it's okay to turn away people when it's not an ethical fit for you. But one of the biggest complaints that I hear from clients, and whether these are, well, and oftentimes they're people working for other individuals, and whether that's a small company or a big one, a Fortune 500. Truly, one of the biggest complaints that I hear from my clients is that they do not feel heard. And they don't expect their employers or even a company that they've bought a product from, they're not expecting them to always agree with them. But what they do expect, what they do want is to just feel validated that they had the right to express that concern or that opinion, and that they're valued as a human being. So ask yourself, if you were a customer, would you want to do business with you? Think about the most challenging client you have ever had, and think about the response that you had to them. And now put yourself in that customer's shoes. In that moment, would you want to do business with you? And we're all guilty of it. We've all had those days. We've all had those breaking points. But that's where we have to sit and learn, acknowledge, and move on and do better the next time. And if you were a worker, if you're working if you were, let's say, you have employees, you have a small staff, you're the president of your company. Reverse those roles and go, okay, if I were my employee, would I want me to be the president of the company? And sometimes those are really great reality checks, is to put ourselves in the shoes of someone else and to really stop and go, okay, how I just responded to that person, if I were them, how would that come across? Because it's very easy when we're the president of a company to forget that perspective. And so I always try to be mindful of it and go, okay, yes, this is really obvious. And yes, this is really frustrating. But as I teach my interns, my associates, the thing is, people have come into counseling for a reason. And we always have to keep that in mind. That's because if they knew all the problems or they knew the answers to all their problems, then they wouldn't be coming to us. And so, yes, we're able to see a lot of things that they can't. And it's the same thing in coaching. I'm able to see the things that they're blinded by. And so with that, I have to have a certain level of patience and to remember they're coming to me for help. So that's what I need to do, and to do all of my service through that lens. Now, if you sell a product, whether that's something tangible or a service, one of the key things to remember is that you are the product. And yes, you're the face of the company too, but you are the product. People buy you. Yes, they buy your tangible thing, but if it's a service, they are 100% buying you. And if it is a product, to an extent, they are buying you as well, because they could buy that widget probably at least a couple of different places, but they chose you to buy the widget from. So here's a really good example that I came across last week when I was listening into someone else's webinar, and it's the Meow Mix example. And there is this individual that had submitted feedback on the Meow Mix forum through their customer site, and they did not respond. They totally ignored it. So the guy, feeling very frustrated, very irked by that lack of customer service, he decided to go to social media. So let's just think about that right there. He went to the Meow Mix fan page on Facebook that had over 400,000 followers. And he posted his issue there. And now he's a little bit more agitated. So right there, not great PR for Meow Mix. And he had a legitimate complaint. He said, hey, could you please take the dyes out of the cat food? Because cats regularly puke. And when they puke, they're puking that dye on the carpet. And that's really hard to get out. And frankly, my cat doesn't care what color his kitty chow is. And instead of Meow Mix responding with the, hey, we hear you, you know what, that is a valid point. They did the most canned response possible. A total lack of situational awareness. Didn't acknowledge his concern, didn't acknowledge anything about the problem. And it was, all of our formulas are scientifically formulated and are approved by the USDA. And it was the most like tone deaf response ever. So what did that tell you about Meow Mix as a company, or at least their PR people, their customer service? And what do you think that did for the 400,000 followers on their Facebook page? Do you think maybe they lost some customers? Now, let's contrast that with another company that did vegan ice cream. And this gentleman responded, he posted, maybe it was on their social media page, maybe it was on their corporate page, and said, hey, I tried your stuff. It tasted like air. Really didn't like it. I mean, there's no sugar, there's no nothing. I mean, it's like, I mean, describing it, it actually sounds like air because there's nothing to it. And he posted. Now, this company responded with situational awareness. And they validated him and they said, you know what? We're really sorry to hear that you really didn't enjoy our product. And so here's a suggestion. Say sometimes if you refrigerate it first and then if you let it to thaw a little bit, the quality might taste a little bit different. So that's just an idea. But regardless, you know, we appreciate your feedback. And let's see, how can we make this right? We'd be glad to send you a different flavor, or we are going to listen to your feedback and take that in consideration. What do you think that did for their public relations? Absolute, yeah, Randolph, thumbs up. And do you think the guy that had his initial complaint, do you think he was a happier customer because of that response? And maybe he told that story to other people? Yeah. So that is a great example of the customer service and listening and the situational awareness. So in a country right now where we're trying to rebuild from the devastation of COVID, from the amazing, massive political divisiveness that we're experiencing, our businesses, our top priority is that we have got to listen more. We have got to be situationally aware. We need to talk less and do what we say we're going to do. And we need to say, if customers are people that we value, we have got to show that. And we've got to go above and beyond showing that. And I'll tell you, for millennials and the Gen Zers, from a counseling perspective, this is something I have really seen develop in the last 5 to 10 years, is that they are skeptical, and authenticity is one of the top things they are looking for. They're a little bit jaded. I mean, I think at this point, all of us are jaded, but this particular demographic, they're looking for authenticity. And if they get any whiff that you're not authentic and you're not genuine, they're done with you. You've lost credibility in their eyes. So as you're marketing to different groups, really keep that in mind. If you say something, you better do it, or you will lose the credibility. And you better believe they know how to use social media, and they will let the entire world know how inauthentic, how disingenuous your company is. And then you get stuck into counterculture, which is like a whole other mess going on. But the reality is that all of us want to do business with people that are genuine. I do. I don't want to do business with someone that's salesy, that feels like a car salesman, that feels like I need to take a shower afterwards. That's what we're all striving. We all want authenticity in our relationships. Now, lesson 2 is very much connected into lesson 1, and that's appreciation. And everyone wants to know that they matter. No one wants to feel insignificant. No one wants to feel like a cog in the wheel or a dollar in someone's pocket. No one wants to feel like they lack purpose. And I know that, maybe that's a little bit depressing sounded, but it's okay because there's a counselor in the house that can help that. Customers like to spend their dollars with businesses that understand and acknowledge at some level that they can go elsewhere to spend their money. So they want to have that appreciation. They want to have the acknowledgement of, you know what, I understand you can go elsewhere. So I really appreciate you coming to me. And it isn't saying that you have to constantly give freebies and discounts and rebates and all of those trappings. It's not saying that at all. Because we know from research, a lot of times there's customer loyalty, and that they may actually spend more with a company if they feel like that company actually follows through and does what it says it's going to do. Customer service oftentimes will outweigh a cheaper price on something. And the thing is, customer service is still free. It's the best way to spend your time, and it has the best return of anything that you can do for your business. So your employees and you, again, are the face of your business. And so you have to ask, are you greeting people? How timely are your responses to their emails or to their posts? Are you thanking them for their purchase? Are you doing a follow-up if it's an online transaction? And here's something, do you find something to compliment them on? If it's an in-face interaction, can you find something to compliment them on? Because we do know from research that helps. It builds a relationship. It helps a person feel more valued. You start to build a connection with the client. And here's an interesting little twist. Do you acknowledge and make yourself available and compliment your employees if you're someone that has staff? So it's not just about us doing it for our customers, it's about us doing this for our staff as well. And here's a little psychology tip. Did you know that research has shown that people who give compliments are happier individuals? They're more positive individuals. So a compliment is a gift. And if you're giving compliments all day, that's like you're giving gifts. You're like Santa Claus out there. And you also get that feedback from people because you can see the smile on their face. So think about that. I mean, if you've gone through the day and you've given several compliments and you've gotten several positive exchanges in return, don't you think you might be a more positive individual? And so here's your experiment. I challenge you, the next time you're feeling down or having a bad day, try to give someone a compliment and just see what happens. And here's the thing is that we do get negative comments from people. People are negative individuals. We know that. But it's always that caution of how you respond, and do not let your emotional brain take over. Like, take a break before you respond to something online, and then maybe have someone else read through your response before you post it. So take a break. Allow yourself to go back into your logical brain, do some breathing, distract yourself with something else, allow yourself to process it, do a truthful, honest, hard assessment, and really look at the comment and really ask yourself, is there something that I actually could have done better? Is there something that maybe my response was not the best, and I got to take it on the chin, and I got to acknowledge I screwed up? And so instead of coming from a defensive standpoint, come from that appreciation, listening, understanding standpoint. And this is a mistake that I really see a lot of companies make. And again, this is what clients report to me, is that the only time they receive feedback is when they've made a mistake. And that totally demotivates your staff. It's the mistake that we see parents and teachers make with dealing with kiddos, that sometimes the only time the only time the student gets attention is when they've done something bad, and then the teacher acknowledges them. So that sets it up for this really negative cycle, because negative attention is better than no attention at all. But for clients, for your customers, for your staff, if the only time that they get any feedback is negative, what do you think that does for their anxiety level, for their stress? Oh yeah, totally goes up, Randolph, 100% on that. And if they don't know where they stand because you never give regular feedback, I guarantee them not knowing where they stand is increasing their anxiety and stress. And where you have increased anxiety and distress, you start to feel helpless and hopeless, and you start to feel depressed. And maybe this is where short-term disability starts to come into play. And that is going to cost you a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of stress if you have an employee that has to go out on short-term disability. So I encourage you to make it a point at least once a month, preferably more than that, to acknowledge your customers. Send out a, hey, you know what? I was thinking about you guys this month, and I just want to let you know, I appreciate you. Thank you. That's it, just short, simple. Don't go into a long spiel. Don't connect into sales promo. Literally just a legitimate, short, simple thank you. That's it, nothing more. And for your staff, please make sure to give them feedback. Say, you know what, I really appreciated that you did this week, or you know what, I wanted to let you know that I noticed how you did that project. Great, spot on, good job. So thinking about it, I want to see who are my gardeners in the audience. Any gardeners? So this is sort of a visual for you. Which plant grows best? The one you let grow freely, wildly, with no trimming, no fertilizer, no nutrients? Or the one that you give proper attention to and you nourish and you give those nutrients? So am I saying
The one you
humans?
talk to.
Yes, it's absolutely the one you talk to. And even how you talk to the plant, the chemicals in your breath, when you're negative and you're in a bad mood, you're actually bringing out negative stress hormones in your breath. And we've seen the science fair experiments of talking badly to a plant and that one dies, and the one that you talk positively to lives. And it's because of the hormones that are released when you're in a positive mood versus a negative. And so, think about that when you're talking with people too. So yes, am I saying that humans are like plants? I am. And there may be some people in your life that are succulents and you need to trim, but that's a whole different talk. So the last lesson, 3, micromanagement kills. And this again is a big thing of why people come into counseling, is because they feel micromanaged. And micromanage comes across as, I don't trust you and I don't respect you. And so you don't want to micromanage anyone, especially if you have employees, but be aware that you can sometimes do that with your customers too, where you're trying to control too much. And I often say in the counseling world that when we go to extremes, we get into trouble. Happiness is in the middle. So if you're a solopreneur, it's easy to get caught up in the micromanagement of things and trying to do too much and feel like you're the only one that can do it correctly. And I am 100% guilty of this. Until one of my business coaches, Kevin France, who's a local multi-millionaire entrepreneur in the DFW area. And Kevin said, Laura, you got to stop being the chief bottle washer and cook and waiter and everything else. You have got to start delegating or your business will never grow. You will always be stuck and you're going to get burnt out. So when you do delegate, try not to micromanage. And delegation again saves you some stress too, and it frees you up to be able to do the things that you really need to do that you uniquely can do versus things that maybe it's not your cup of tea. And of course, you never want anyone to fear you. Fear is not respect. It's not. You might get the short-term benefit if they do what you want, but long-term, it's extremely damaging. So as a final little tip there, one thing I would encourage you to do is go through and journal the things that previous employers did wrong, because all of us have had a job at some point. Journal the things that your employers did wrong, but also journal the things they did right. And then in addition to that, journal examples of when you were a customer and you felt appreciated, and then journal the examples of times where you felt like they missed it. That customer service was horrid. It's important to do both parts of that exercise of the customer service piece when it was great and bad, and also the employee-employer relationship, good and bad. Because those are learning experiences. Because a lot of times you go, oh, I'm going to remember that. Because when you're in the moment, you don't. And when it's your own business, you put those little blinders on and you don't remember. So that would be some quick tips on that piece. And then, part of that, identifying what companies did bad and what companies aren't doing well, whether in the employer situation or in customer service thing, that is your pain point. You identify those negatives, and guess what? You just identified pain points. And do you know what you can do with pain points? Anyone? Do you know what you can do when you identify pain points in your customers?
You can sell them something to solve that problem.
100%. You take advantage of the pain points and you do something to solve them. Because there are a lot of tone deaf businesses out there that are ignoring the pain points. And this is your opportunity of what do you do differently other people aren't. This is the red box to Blockbuster example. Blockbuster had a monopoly and they had an ego and they thought they were the best game in town. And then Redbox came around and took them out. Be the red box in your industry. So do you think that you are capable of acting and implementing these 3 quick tips of listening, appreciation, and avoiding micromanagement? So hopefully you are, because I think you're all capable of doing that. And if you have questions on that, you're wanting to know a little bit more, maybe some more specific examples of how to implement this, then contact me. I'm Lori Vann with Vann and Associates Coaching, Counseling, and Consulting, and I'm here to serve.
Great. Let's give Lori a great big hand. That was a great talk today. We appreciate that. We've got a little bit of time, so if you would like to make a comment or you'd like to ask Lori a question, just unmute your mic and give it a shot. Jennifer?
When she was talking about compliments, I actually did that. I like doing that to people. I don't wear shoes because my feet being swollen a lot. And so I always live vicariously through everybody else's shoes. And I'm like, oh, I like your shoes. And one time I was in an elevator alone with a guy and I'm like, I like your sweater. And he literally was like, thank you. So it's just fun to freak people out with that.
Great. Thanks, Jen. Anybody else?
One of my favorite things to do, of course, before we all had to be wearing masks, was wherever I was at, a store, walking on the street, I would smile at the person coming toward me. It's just amazing what that does when you smile at somebody. It's just like it's like made their day almost,
Rick and Jean, it's funny you say that because that's one of my big things. And I found through COVID, now I just say, hi, how you doing? because they can't see my smile, but they can hear my tone. And I'm just a friendly guy. Some people give me a look, like, what, weirdo, or but hey, I can deal with that. Other comments? Electric, Lloyd?
I wanted to comment about listening, because that is so key to listen. And I think most people, the biggest problem they have with listening is they listen, like you said, Lori, to respond, and they listen to make themselves interesting to the person you're listening to, as opposed to being interested in the person. And that is so key, because if you want somebody to be your customer, you got to know them, and you can't know them if you're doing all the talking, and if you're trying to one up their story. So it's hard. It is very hard to be an active listener. It's a process that I'm going through myself. So I constantly have to tell myself, shut up, Lloyd, shut up, Lloyd, don't say nothing. So, but that's very key, and I think that's so important. And that's in any relationship: employee, friend, husband, wife, potential client. Listening is the key.
Good point. Thanks, Lloyd. Anybody else have any questions or comments for Lori?
I have a question.
Gabrielle, please.
So I also studied psychology in undergrad. I minored in it. Love psychology and human behavior. So I'm just curious what area you mainly focused on in your psychology endeavors.
The undergrad and graduate in psychology. So my graduate school, because they had more emphasis, it was marriage, family, child counseling, and thought, oh, I'm going to be this great marriage counselor and all these things. And then I started to do marital counseling. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really painful. Because most times, by the time someone comes to marital counseling, one of them's already made up their mind and we're just going through the motions.
That makes sense.
I often tell people, give me an angsty teen any day of the week, because I have a real knack. I'm blessed. I'm able to connect with some of the most challenging cases. My particular area of expertise, or regard as an authority in, is on non-suicidal self-injury. So people that burn, hit, cut, pick, scratch, the 20 plus different forms of it. That's my niche. That's what I've written 4 out of the 5 books on. So yeah, it's not the most upbeat topic. So I like to be able to do the business side.
Does that help, Gabrielle?
Awesome.
Gabrielle?
Yeah,
Okay,
yes,
great.
yes.
One comment I'd like to make from my years of experience as a manager and a leader, executive, is on the topic of feedback. There's a difference between, oh, great job. Yeah, you really did a great job. And what I really liked about your presentation was, and be specific. People like to hear some specific feedback, and that goes for criticism as well. You got to say why. What specifically didn't you get or didn't you like? Because that helps them moving forward to correct what it is, or it helps them continue with behavior that you and others found positive. Anybody else?
Yeah, I wanted to also come back to your definition of perfection. I really like that, because a lot of us spend time trying to be perfect, and we mostly spend it trying to be perfect before we get started. So if we're not a surgeon or airline pilot, forget about being perfect. Just go out and mess it up and fix it on the way.
Great.
Yes, there are some different standards on that part, and I'm just going to throw up there my contact information in case you do have any questions that come up. Get there. But yes, we do get so stuck in that perfectionism piece, and that goes into the micromanagement aspect. And I can say on the counseling side, that's something that people have come into my office as adults, and where they end up on short-term disability is because they're a perfectionist and they've gotten burnt out, and their employers kept raising the bar. And eventually you get to a place where there's no way they can meet that standard. And they're going in having panic attacks. And I have a whole bunch of students that struggle with perfectionism. So yes, we have to be more realistic about it. And I made a t-shirt once that said, perfectionism's boring.
I like that.
It is.
I like that. Okay, well, we got a few minutes. Anybody on the call have any announcements or gratitude or thanks? Feel free, Lori, if you could take that down just so we can see people.
Mhm.
Appreciate that. Everybody got her contact info? You can put it in the chat too, Lori. That would be helpful.
Okay. There.
Great, thank you. All right, so just unmute your mic if you've got anything you want to say. Mako, got something you'd like to add?
Oh, maybe just an observation when she was talking about active listening. Even though we're not face to face, that we're a lot of us are Zooming now. You can actively listen on the Zoom or not actively listen on Zoom, because when you, especially on gallery view, you see guys or gals, off on their phones or doing something while you're giving your commercial.
Yep.
And you notice that right away that they're not listening to you. And stuff, or that's just I've noticed as we all are Zooming a lot, or when you're at these networking meetings and these guys or girls ask, hey, you mind if I do my commercial first, because I gotta go, and they don't have the courtesy to listen to your commercials.
That's right. They just want to hear
and that's a pet peeve of mine when they do that, when they allow them to do that.
Yeah, there is such a thing as Zoom etiquette, Mako, and you bring up a good point. John, did you have something you wanted to ask or contribute, please?
Just want to remind everybody to say happy birthday to President Lincoln.
Oh, okay. Hope he doesn't roll over in his grave.
Well, don't get me started on that topic, because I think if he hasn't already, if he's watching what's going on, he probably already has, but that's a different story.
There you go. All right. Okay, well, let's give Lori one more round of applause. That was a great talk. Very articulate, pointful. I took a lot of notes, as always. I like the listen, avoid, and agreement. Those are the three that I wrote down. And I wish I could go back and be a boss all over again so I could fix a few of those points that you picked up today.
And don't forget the compliments.
That's right, the compliments.
I love you, Randy.
I love you too, brother. All right, why don't we see if David, anything particular you'd like to add to our conversation? We got 5 minutes.
No, it was great. Thank you, Lori. It was awesome. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Sorry if I was listening intently. I was watching the road, but I was listening intently.